With The Last of Us Season 2 now filming and set for release in 2025, a big question has come up regarding the future of this TV series, and in particular the future of a certain character within the TV series, that of course being Joel Miller, played wonderfully by Pedro Pascal. That question being, is Joel going to die in Season 2? Now, just for context, of course, spoilers for The Last of Us Part 2, the video game, Joel dies in that game. I'm sure that's pretty much public knowledge at this point. But Joel does die in that second game, and as you can see with all the memorabilia around me, I am a huge fan of The Last of Us, both the game and the TV show, Season 1 of the TV show. I love everything to do with The Last of Us. It's one of my favourite IPs across all forms of media. I just adore this franchise. I adore Naughty Dog as a video game developer. I love this franchise. I love these characters. And for me, going into this second season, I'm really excited to see what they're actually going to do and how they're going to adapt that almost perfect second game, in my opinion. Now, as I said, I'm a huge fan of The Last of Us, and that includes the TV series. Obviously, you can see the Blu-ray up here. I really liked The Last of Us Season 1. I thought it was an absolutely phenomenal piece of television. I also thought it was arguably the best video game adaptation I have ever seen. It was incredible. And for me personally, one of the reasons why I loved it so much is because it really felt like the game. It really, just tonally and atmospherically, the characters, the writing, the world, everything was absolutely spot on. It was perfect. So going into Season 2, I want them to replicate that, I want them to keep that level of authenticity. I want them to continue to make the game feel as similar to the TV show as they possibly can. So when it comes to the killing of characters, and especially the killing of Joel, where do I land on that, and where do I think they're going to go? So in this video, I'm going to discuss some reasons why I think they will kill Joel in Season 2, and some reasons why I think they won't. So let's start off. I'm going to start with why I think they will kill Joel, just like they did in the game. So the first reason why I think they will kill Joel is because when you look at Season 1, they followed the story of that first game very closely. Like, don't get me wrong, obviously there are things that had to be cut, and there are things they did change, in my opinion, much for the better. But regardless, the story of Season 1 is pretty close to the game, and it's pretty much a beat-for-beat adaptation, as best as they could have in like a 7-episode TV show or 9-episode TV show. They did the best they could with that. So with that in mind, just thinking, oh, well, if Season 1 followed the game so closely, surely Season 2 will follow the second game so closely. Logically, you think that's where they would go. Also, creator of The Last of Us, Neil Druckmann, is so heavily involved in this series that I feel like he's not going to allow such a big creative decision to not play out. The reason why Season 1 was so good, in my opinion, is because Neil Druckmann was so involved. He is the guy who created The Last of Us. It's his brainchild. It's his baby. So the fact that he was such a strong creative force behind the scenes meant that the game had that level of authenticity, and the TV show had that level of authenticity, and that's why I loved it so much. So with him being just as involved in Season 2, makes me feel like that decision that he was kind of at the forefront of in the game is also going to want that decision to come through onto the TV show. And I think the main reason why Joel will die in Season 2 is because if they are adapting the story of The Last of Us Part 2 so closely, that whole storyline doesn't work if Joel doesn't die. If Joel stays alive, that whole storyline is irrelevant. Literally the whole story, all the themes that go with it, all the character motivations, none of it can happen without the death of Joel towards the beginning of the game. It just doesn't work. So unless they completely switch up the story for Part 2 and they're going to go in a completely different direction, you kind of have to kill Joel in order for the story to work. It doesn't make sense otherwise. Because I've seen some people argue, it's oh, well, maybe Joel will just get really heavily injured or something, and that's, will start the story. But it doesn't make sense. It doesn't work in the same way. Joel dying starts the whole theme of the cycle of violence between Ellie and Abby. Without Joel's death, that means nothing. That doesn't even happen. And the story of Part 2 is completely irrelevant. So I believe that the main reason they will kill Joel is because the story doesn't work without that death. But let's go over to the flip side. Let's talk about a couple of the reasons as to why maybe he won't die in Season 2 of this show. And I think the first reason why is because when you look at The Last of Us Part 2, if you played that game, if you were kind of in the internet space at the time of that game releasing, you'll know that it was quite a polarizing experience. Half the fans really didn't like the game, didn't like the fact they killed Joel, and really didn't like some of the creative decisions that were made. You did have the other half of the fan base, though, which I'm very much a part of, that loved the game, thought it was even better than the first one, and had an amazing time with it, despite how emotionally distressing it was. Now, going into season 2 of the show, this could be the chance for some fans to maybe get a bit of respite, and I think that there is the possibility that they could look at the story and go, well, let's try going in a different direction with this. Let's see if we save Joel rather than killing him, we can kind of satisfy those fans who we may be disappointed when we made the game. That is a possibility and a direction and a motivation I could see behind them keeping Joel alive. Also, going back to Neil Druckmann, one thing he has said about the production of the TV show, and one thing he did in season 1 as well, is that this show is an opportunity for him to explore different avenues and to do different things that he wasn't able to do in the game. And even though season 1 does follow the game so closely, there were a lot of big changes, particularly like the Bill and Frank stuff and some of the stuff they did with Sam and Henry. Like, there were some big changes that Druckmann and Mazin made when it came to making the TV show, which did differ from the game. And I feel like going into season 2, if Druckmann wants to go in a completely different direction and he wants to just see if he can do the story in a different way just because it's a different medium, he could keep Joel alive and do it a different way. And again, it keeps a certain section of the fan base happy who were really unhappy when playing the game when Joel died. So Druckmann could potentially just want to try something different here and keep his main character alive. And a third reason why I think Joel might still survive is purely a realistic reason, which is that Pedro Pascal is a bloody movie star at this point. He's so popular. Like, people love him. And when you think about The Last of Us and you think about particularly the TV show, he's the face of it. Like, he is the star of it. So if you take out Pedro Pascal, does the fan base of the show still want to watch it? If it loses its main character, because obviously that was such a big thing in the game. The main character died, and then we played as Ellie in the second game. But in season 2 of The Last of Us, if you lose Pedro Pascal, like, his audience is such a huge part of the fan base of the TV show. If you kill him off, surely you're going to lose a big part of the fan base there. So I feel like with Pedro being so popular and being the face of the show, I feel like they might try and keep him around just for that. But also, as I did mention, Pedro Pascal is also a movie star and has got Fantastic Four coming out and Gladiator 2 coming out. He's a very, very busy man, so they might potentially have to cut him for that reason as well. But what's my opinion? How do I feel like it's going to go down? Well, to kind of play devil's advocate a little bit, I think that Joel is going to die in season 2. I think. Because, as I said, unless they completely change the storyline of part 2 and just go in a completely different direction, I think without killing Joel, the storyline that they're going to tell just doesn't work. And based on what we've heard about season 2 and the castings we've had, like, we know that Caitlin Dever is, of course, in this series as Abby. Surely they've got to be killing Joel. However, one thing that Craig Mazin has said about this show is that the story of part 2 is likely going to be split across another season, possibly another 2 seasons. He's spoken about this show going to season 3, season 4, and with that in mind, we might potentially maybe not see Joel die in this season, and he might die in season 3, and that will be like the next part of the story, if that makes sense. I feel like that is a very real possibility. If they're splitting the story of part 2, which is a very long game, by the way, if they're splitting that into 2 seasons, for example, perhaps perhaps season 2 is going to be the build-up to Joel's death and introducing Abby and reintroducing us to the world, and then season 3 is going to be like the revenge cycle of violence story, and they might even split that again and maybe make this season 4 the finale. So there is ways they could go about it, and it could be the chance that perhaps in season 2, Pedro Pascal can stay around for it. He's still in it, but then at the very end he dies, and then in season 3 and 4, we will get Pedro Pascal maybe in a recurring role in flashbacks, like we saw in the game, where he can have these little scenes with Ellie throughout. So we can still have Pedro within the show, just not being the main character. So in my opinion, yes, I think Joel will die in this story, but I think it potentially might happen a little bit later than we initially think. But there you have it, guys. There's my thoughts on whether or not Joel is going to die in The Last of Us Season 2. Make sure to let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Are you looking forward to Season 2? Did you like Season 1? Are you a fan of The Last of Us? And do you think Joel's going to die? That's the big question going into this next season. Is Joel gonna die? Let me know your thoughts and join the ramble in the comment section down below. And if you want to see more content just like this, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any uploads from me. And I hope to see you guys again next time.